Imagine a city so powerful that kings from across the known world sent tribute just to avoid being conquered. A place with walls so thick that chariots could race on top of them. Gardens so magnificent that ancient writers call them one of the seven wonders of the world. This city existed. For over 1,000 years, it was the center of civilization, the birthplace of written law, the home of mathematics and astronomy, a place where you could walk down streets paved with stone while most of the world was still living in mud huts. Then one night, everything changed. An army broke through the walls. The king was killed, and within a generation, the greatest city on earth was abandoned, left to be buried by sand and time. Today, I'm going to tell you the real story of Babylon. Not the myths, not the legends, the actual history of how one city rose to rule the ancient world and how it all came crashing down. Welcome to Stories Lost Forever. How Babylon became a superpower. Babylon sits in what is now Iraq, about 50 miles south of modern-day Baghdad, on the banks of the Euphrates River. The city was founded around 2300 BC, but it didn't become important until much later. For centuries, it was just another settlement in Mesopotamia, controlled by whoever happened to be the dominant power at the time. That changed in 1792 BC, when a king named Hammurabi took the throne. Hammurabi wasn't born into a powerful empire. When he became king, Babylon controlled maybe 50 square miles of territory. But over the next 43 years of his reign, he transformed Babylon from a minor city-state into the capital of an empire that stretched across Mesopotamia. How did he do it? Military conquest, smart alliances, and something nobody expected: law. Hammurabi created the Code of Hammurabi, one of the first written legal systems in human history. It wasn't the first set of laws ever written, but it was the most comprehensive. 282 laws covering everything from trade and property rights to marriage and criminal justice. The code was carved into a massive stone pillar and displayed in the center of Babylon so everyone could see it. The idea was simple. If the laws are written down in public, nobody can claim they didn't know them. Judges couldn't just make up punishments. Everything was standardized. This created stability. Merchants knew their contracts would be enforced. Citizens knew what would happen if they broke the rules. And that stability attracted people. Babylon became a trade hub. It sat right between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea, on the Euphrates River, which meant goods flowing between east and west had to pass through it. Traders came from Egypt, Anatolia, Persia, and the Indus Valley. They brought gold, silver, copper, textiles, grain, and spices. Babylon took a cut of everything. The wealth from trade funded construction projects. Hammurabi built temples, palaces, and walls. He dug canals to control flooding and irrigate farmland. Under his rule, Babylon went from a regional power to the dominant force in Mesopotamia. When Hammurabi died in 1750 BC, he left behind an empire and a city that would remain important for over 1,000 years. But here's the thing about empires. They don't last. After Hammurabi's death, Babylon's power declined. Other kingdoms rose and challenged it. The Hittites sacked the city in 1595 BC. The Kassites took control and ruled for several centuries. Babylon changed hands multiple times over the next few hundred years. By 1000 BC, it was a shadow of its former self. Then came the Assyrians. For most of the first millennium BC, the Assyrian Empire was the dominant power in the region. They were brutal. When they conquered a city, they didn't just take it over. They destroyed it, burned it, deported the population. And Babylon, despite its history, was just another city in their empire. In 689 BC, the Assyrian king Sennacherib got fed up with Babylon's constant rebellions. He ordered the city destroyed. His army tore down the walls, burned the temples, and diverted the Euphrates River to flood the ruins. Babylon was gone, or so everyone thought. But you can't erase a city with that much history. Within a few decades, Sennacherib's son, Esarhaddon, rebuilt Babylon. He needed it as a political and economic center. And when the Assyrian Empire started to collapse in the late 600s BC, Babylon was ready to rise again. The Golden Age. In 626 BC, a general named Nabopolassar seized control of Babylon and declared independence from Assyria. He formed an alliance with the Medes, another power in the region, and together they destroyed the Assyrian Empire. By 609 BC, Assyria was gone, and Babylon was the new superpower. But the real Golden Age came under Nabopolassar's son, Nebuchadnezzar II, who took the throne in 605 BC. Nebuchadnezzar is the most famous king in Babylonian history, and for good reason. He turned Babylon into the greatest city the ancient world had ever seen. First, he fortified the city. Babylon's walls became legendary. The outer walls were over 10 miles long and thick enough that chariots could drive on top of them. Some ancient sources claim the walls were 300 feet tall, though modern archaeologists think that's an exaggeration. Still, they were massive. The walls had multiple layers, with a moat and defensive towers. Attacking Babylon was nearly impossible. Inside the walls, Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt the city on a scale nobody had attempted before. He constructed the Ishtar Gate, a massive entrance covered in blue glazed bricks decorated with images of dragons and bulls. The gate was part of the processional way, a road that ran through the city and was used for religious festivals. The road was paved with limestone and red bricks, and the walls on either side were covered in reliefs of lions. The centerpiece of the city was the Edamananke, a massive ziggurat dedicated to the god Marduk. This was likely the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel. The ziggurat was a stepped pyramid about 300 feet tall. At the top was a temple where priests performed rituals. You could see it from miles away, dominating the skyline. And then there were the hanging gardens. According to ancient Greek and Roman writers, Nebuchadnezzar built them for his wife, who missed the green hills of her homeland. The gardens were supposedly terraced, with trees, flowers, and plants irrigated by an advanced system of water channels. They were described as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Here's the problem. We have no archaeological evidence that the Hanging Gardens existed in Babylon. No Babylonian texts mention them. No physical remains have been found. Some historians think they might have been in Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, and later writers confused the two cities. Others think they existed but were destroyed so completely that nothing survived. It's one of the great mysteries of ancient history. What we do know is that Nebuchadnezzar was obsessed with building. He constructed palaces, temples, and infrastructure. He restored old monuments and built new ones. He wanted Babylon to be the center of the world, and for a time it was. Merchants, diplomats, and scholars from across the known world came to Babylon. It was a cosmopolitan city with people speaking dozens of languages. Nebuchadnezzar also expanded the empire. He conquered the kingdom of Judah in 597 BC and again in 586 BC, destroying Jerusalem and exiling the Jewish population to Babylon. This event, known as the Babylonian captivity, is a major part of Jewish history and is recorded in the Bible. Thousands of Jews were taken to Babylon, where they lived for decades until the city fell. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon reached its peak. The city covered about 2,000 acres and had a population estimated between 100,000 and 200,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the ancient world. It was wealthy, powerful, and seemingly invincible. Nebuchadnezzar ruled for 43 years, dying in 562 BC. But his successors couldn't maintain what he built. Real quick, if you're enjoying these lost stories, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps other people find these videos. And if you want more stories like this every week, subscribe to Stories Lost Forever. One night that changed everything. After Nebuchadnezzar died, Babylon went through a series of weak kings. There were power struggles, assassinations, and instability. By 556 BC, a man named Nabonidus was on the throne. He wasn't a warrior king like Nebuchadnezzar. He was more interested in religion and archaeology than politics. He spent years away from Babylon, exploring ruins and worshiping gods that most Babylonians didn't care about. While Nabonidus was distracted, a new power was rising in the east. Cyrus II, known as Cyrus the Great, had united the Medes and Persians and was building an empire. Between 550 and 539 BC, Cyrus conquered kingdom after kingdom. He took Lydia in modern-day Turkey. He took the eastern territories of the old Median Empire. And then he turned his attention to Babylon. Nabonidus finally returned to Babylon and put his son Belshazzar in charge of the city's defense. But Belshazzar wasn't a military leader. He was young, inexperienced, and overconfident. He believed Babylon's walls were impregnable. No army had ever broken through them. Why would the Persians be any different? In 539 BC, Cyrus marched on Babylon. Instead of attacking the walls directly, he did something clever. The Euphrates River ran through the city, entering through gates in the northern wall and exiting through the southern wall. Cyrus diverted the river upstream, lowering the water level. Then, in the middle of the night, his soldiers waded through the shallow water, entered the city through the river gates, and opened the main gates from the inside. According to ancient sources, Babylon fell in a single night. The Persian army poured into the city. Belshazzar was killed. Nabonidus was captured. And just like that, the greatest city in the world had a new ruler. But here's where it gets interesting. Cyrus didn't destroy Babylon. He didn't sack it. He didn't massacre the population. Instead, he declared himself the legitimate king of Babylon and presented himself as a liberator, not a conqueror. He restored temples, returned stolen statues to other cities, and allowed the exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem. This was recorded on the Cyrus cylinder, a clay artifact that's sometimes called the first declaration of human rights. Why was Cyrus so lenient? Politics. Babylon was still an important city. Destroying it would have been a waste. By presenting himself as a legitimate ruler rather than an invader, Cyrus gained the loyalty of the Babylonian people and priesthood. It was a smart move. For a while, Babylon remained an important city under Persian rule. It was one of the capitals of the Persian Empire. Persian kings maintained the palaces and temples, but the city was no longer the center of power. That had shifted to Persia. Then came Alexander the Great. In 331 BC, Alexander defeated the Persians and took control of their empire, including Babylon. Alexander was fascinated by the city. He planned to make it his capital and restore its former glory. He ordered the reconstruction of the Etemenanke ziggurat, which had fallen into disrepair. He held festivals and ceremonies in the city. For a brief moment, it seemed like Babylon might rise again. But Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC at the age of 32. His empire immediately fractured. His generals fought over the territories, and Babylon became a pawn in their wars. One of Alexander's generals, Seleucus, eventually took control of the region. But instead of maintaining Babylon, he built a new city nearby called Seleucia. He relocated much of Babylon's population to the new city. Babylon was no longer needed. Over the next few centuries, Babylon slowly declined. People left. Buildings crumbled. The irrigation systems that sustained the city fell into disrepair. By the time of the Roman Empire, Babylon was mostly abandoned. Travelers who visited described it as a ruin, a ghost of its former self. The city that had dominated the ancient world for over 1,000 years was gone. Rediscovery. For over 1,000 years, Babylon was lost. The ruins were buried under sand and dirt. Local people knew there was something there, but most of the ancient city was hidden. The location was roughly known because of historical text, but nobody had excavated it. That changed in the 1800s when European archaeologists became obsessed with finding the great cities of the ancient world. In 1811, a British traveler named Claudius Rich visited the site and made sketches and maps. He collected bricks with inscriptions and confirmed that this was indeed Babylon. But large-scale excavation didn't start until later. In 1899, a German archaeologist named Robert Koldewey began systematic excavations at Babylon. He worked there for 18 years, uncovering massive amounts of the ancient city. He found the Ishtar Gate, the processional way, the foundations of Nebuchadnezzar's palace, and parts of the ziggurat. He also found thousands of clay tablets with cuneiform writing, which provided detailed records of Babylonian life, economy, and administration. One of Koldewey's most famous discoveries was the Ishtar Gate. He excavated the gate and shipped the glazed bricks back to Germany, where they were reassembled at the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. You can still see it there today. It's one of the most stunning pieces of ancient architecture in any museum. But not everyone was happy with how these excavations were handled. The practice at the time was for archaeologists to take artifacts back to their home countries. Museums in Europe filled up with treasures from Babylon, Egypt, and other ancient sites. Today, many people argue that these artifacts should be returned to Iraq, where they belong. In the 1980s, Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, became obsessed with Babylon. He saw himself as a modern-day Nebuchadnezzar and wanted to restore the city. He ordered the reconstruction of parts of Babylon, including walls and buildings. But the reconstruction was controversial. Archaeologists criticized it for being historically inaccurate and for damaging the original ruins. Hussein even had bricks made with his name inscribed on them, mimicking the ancient practice of kings stamping their names on construction materials. Then came the Iraq War. In 2003, after the U.S. invaded Iraq, the site of Babylon was turned into a military base. Troops dug trenches, drove vehicles over ancient ruins, and used the area as a helicopter landing zone. Archaeologists were horrified. The damage was significant. After the war, UNESCO and Iraqi authorities worked to assess the damage and begin preservation efforts. Today, Babylon is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Iraqi government is working with international organizations to preserve what's left and promote tourism. You can visit Babylon, walk through the ruins, and see the reconstructed Ishtar Gate. It's a shadow of what it once was, but the history is still there, buried in the dirt. The legacy. Babylon wasn't just a powerful city. It was a center of learning and innovation. The things invented or developed in Babylon shaped the world we live in today. Let's start with mathematics. The Babylonians used a base 60 number system, which is why we have 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. They developed advanced algebra and geometry. They could calculate the area of fields, the volume of containers, and solve complex equations. Clay tablets from Babylon show mathematical tables and problems that students use for learning. Then there's astronomy. Babylonian priests observed the sky for centuries, recording the movements of the stars and planets. They created star charts and could predict lunar eclipses. Their astronomical records were so accurate that later civilizations, including the Greeks, used them as a foundation for their own studies. The zodiac, the division of the sky into 12 sections, comes from Babylonian astronomy. Babylon also contributed to medicine. Clay tablets describe symptoms, diagnoses, and treatments for various illnesses. Babylonian doctors used a mix of herbal remedies, surgery, and rituals. They understood that some diseases were contagious and took steps to isolate sick individuals. It wasn't modern medicine, but it was far more advanced than most of the ancient world. And of course, there's law. The Code of Hammurabi influenced legal systems across the region. The idea that laws should be written, public, and apply equally to everyone was revolutionary. It set a precedent that can be traced through Roman law, Islamic law, and eventually to the legal systems we have today. Babylon's influence extended to culture and religion. Stories from Babylonian mythology influenced later cultures. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known works of literature, was written in Babylon. It tells the story of a king's quest for immortality and includes a flood narrative that's strikingly similar to the story of Noah's Ark in the Bible. Even the word Babylon has become symbolic. In religious texts, especially in Christianity, Babylon represents excess, corruption, and the fall of great powers. It's used as a metaphor for any society that becomes too proud and then collapses. The phrase "the fall of Babylon" is synonymous with the end of empires. Babylon's legacy is everywhere. The way we measure time, the way we study the stars, the concept of written law, the stories we tell, all of it traces back to this ancient city in Mesopotamia. Babylon ruled the world for over 1,000 years. It survived conquests, rebuildings, and the rise and fall of empires. It was a city of innovation, power, and culture. And then it was gone, abandoned, buried, forgotten by most of the world. But the legacy remains. Every time you check the time, you're using a system invented in Babylon. Every time you look at a horoscope, you're referencing Babylonian astronomy. The laws that govern modern societies could trace their roots back to the Code of Hammurabi. Babylon fell, but it never truly disappeared. Its influence shaped the world we live in today. And the ruins still stand in the Iraqi desert, a reminder that no matter how powerful an empire becomes, nothing lasts forever. This was the story of Babylon, the city that ruled the world. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to Stories Lost Forever and turn on notifications. Because history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding how we got here. And Babylon is where so much of it began.